Hello, everyone. We are all here today connected for one reason. We are celebrating Women's Month, and we thought that we could do it in a special way. So just by way of introduction, my name is Nambula Kachumi. I am the Executive Director at the Women's Entrepreneurship Access Center. I'm very excited to welcome you today. The reason why we decided to partner with Pioneers in Skirts in screening this movie today is very, very special. We are all working towards a common goal in ensuring that we can get as many women as possible to effectively address one of the most daunting issues surrounding women and girls around the world, and that is gender equality. So WEAC is an entrepreneurial community for women that provides a virtual and a physical space where women gain access to various economically empowering resources. So we provide a platform to access tools, networks, training, mentorship, and support you as you start and scale your business. So our key focus area is to address gender barriers to entrepreneurship. And this is why this partnership with Pioneers in Skirts is very, very important, because we focus on some of the issues and challenges that women face as they try to start and grow their businesses, but also as they get on the trajectory of building their careers and working towards their ambitions. So I hope that this evening we can have a very interactive session with great panelists. And at this point, I'd like to reintroduce our guest speakers this evening. To begin with, I'd like to welcome Mizinga Melu. Mizinga is the Managing Director at Absa Zambia PLC, and she's one of our guest speakers tonight. We also have Nankhonde, Kasonde-van. So she is the founder of Zanga Africa Metrics. She's an executive coach, a serial entrepreneur. She's run quite a number of businesses in Zambia. So we are happy also to hear from her and gain some insights around, gender biases and gender equality issues that we are discussing this evening. I would also like to, first of all, say a big thank you to Lea-Ann and Ashley. So Lea-Ann and Ashley are mother and daughter based in the US. Ashley is a director of the movie documentary that we're just from watching. She's also a writer. She's an activist. She's also a founder for the Ashley Maria production, and she's done amazing work in the US and across the globe in terms of driving, the ambition of, supporting gender equality and ensuring that we get as many people as possible on board. So Ashley, thank you. Fantastic work that you're doing. And welcome once again to Lea-Ann. Lea-Ann is the producer for Pioneers in Skirts. She's a filmmaker as well. She's also a gender activist, and she's worked a lot around documentaries to do with culture change, and basically has a lot of passion around supporting, women in business, women in the workplace, and really addressing those issues that matter the most as women are pioneering their ambitions. So welcome, very exciting this evening. So I think we'll go straight into our discussion. And I'm sure a lot of you have, depicted a number of issues that you may have experienced in your own careers, in your own journeys, as you are trying to push your businesses forward and to climb up the corporate ladder. So to begin with, I'd like to engage our panelists. By the way, I'd just like to encourage you to continue putting any questions that you may have in the chat box. We'll have a session for Q&A. Would like to hear from you. If you have specific questions for our panelists, we'll be glad to take those. So please just take note of that. I would also like to welcome any of our partners that might be joining us tonight, particularly from the US Embassy, who is a founding partner for WEAC. We are happy to have you. Thank you for your support. And our other partners like Professional Insurance. I would also like to give special attention to Musola Kaseketi, who is a Zambian filmmaker that has equally made a lot of strides in terms of pushing the women's agenda in the film industry. So maybe we'll get to hear from her through the chat as well. So to begin with, I'd like to bring on board Mizinga. to just tell us how you have connected with the movie. What are some of those issues that you feel are very significant in your journey, as an author, as a woman influencer, not only in Zambia, but across Africa, doing amazing things in the banking industry and supporting financial inclusion for women, but also from a personal perspective. I know you've had a lot to share in your book that you recently authored as well. You've talked about quite a number of things that are very relevant in terms of mentoring young women, especially as they pioneer their ambition. So just tell us how you've resonated with some of the issues that have been brought out in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Nambula, and thank you so much, guys, for Ashley and Lea-Ann for the movie. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie, and it related to my career, to my life over the years. And I think in terms of some of the thematic in terms of what the main actress was going through, I think initially she was being undermined. Can she really do that? And I think that's something that totally related to me. The unconscious bias, even the imposter syndrome. We didn't really talk about the imposter syndrome in the movie per se, but it is there, where even when she's given the job, even before she's criticized, she thinks herself that maybe she would not be able to do the job, to that capacity. So there was just a lot that related to it, including her managing the family when she got pregnant, just what people thought of her and how she would manage. But it was great to see that, like you rightly say, it is a journey. We still have a lot to do. However, I think if you had to look at the 360 degrees circle, we are probably at 90 degrees. We still have a lot of work to do. She spoke about being the first, being the only woman in the room, so to say. I guess it's a movie that a lot of women would relate to. And that's just one of the reasons why I wrote my book, just because there's just a lot, like in the movie, where you just feel people shouldn't feel like they're on their own. There are so many other people that are going through what they're going through, and they can actually relate to that. When they relate to that, it becomes easier, because then you are able to say, look, I'm not on my own, so to say. Mm-hmm.
So is there a very specific moment in your journey where you felt like you were alone, or that you stepped into a world that was dominated by men? Did you feel alone at one point?
Yeah, I mean, it's even difficult to pick up a time, just because I've been a leader all my life, and many a times it does feel like you are alone, even in the boardroom. You actually do feel, I don't know where I was this week, where I actually looked at the room. Yeah, I was attending a football. We were actually launching our cup, our Premier Cup. And I just looked around the table, and I was actually alone. Everybody else was a man, just because it's something that I have to do in my position as CEO. But the people who are interested in the sport are all men. The people who are, so you do have industries like that are huge, that are big, and that are there. And to be honest, for me, I think they look at me and think, I don't even blame them for thinking that, because number one, I'm not interested in football, but I think they think I'm not interested in football. So if I was interested, they would obviously still think I'm not. So I do find myself in those situations all the time. But I guess when I was appointed as CEO in 2008 at Standard Chartered, for me, it did feel, I think that's the first time where it felt that leadership is lonely at the top. And it was quite interesting, and I give some very very, very crazy examples. Maybe Ashley and Lea-Ann wouldn't be able to relate, but in Zambia we have people who come into the offices to sell clothes, and they sell different things, and people will like buy, and they will tell you that you're going to pay over 2 months or whatever. So people just come and they sell, and it was, I don't know whether it's less so, because I haven't really bought any clothes like that in the recent past, but it was always like that. Somebody would come in the shop, in the office, and all the ladies would like rush to the bathroom, and they'll come back and they'll keep quiet like nothing happened. Meanwhile, they've all done all their shopping. So I used to be in that category before, because I would be the one who would go to actually who would go to the bathroom. Then I realized that when I came back as CEO, and then I would ask somebody, I said, wow, that's so nice. Where did you buy it? And says, oh yeah, somebody came to the bathroom. I'm like, hey, but you didn't tell me. Oh no, you're CEO now. So then you realize that, okay, it is lonely at the top, because you're still only human. You're still only a girl. You're still only, you still want to participate in those things. Yeah. But people kind of box you and say she's the boss. So it does then feel lonely, especially initially. Over time, you kind of get used to it. But initially, it was very lonely, because then you realize that suddenly people box you into this human being, and you are totally not part of the conversation that is going on, apart from the formal structured conversation in the boardroom. And as we know, most conversations happen outside the boardroom. So it did kind of feel a little bit lonely. And I remember when I talk about that in my book, everybody said, Lo, you know what, if you want to have conversations with men, you need to play golf. And I'm like, okay, golf. I've never played golf. I don't like golf. But I was told, even when I was coming back to my job, that I needed to buy a golf kit and all that. So I had that. So they said, oh yeah, you need to play. You play golf. But the thing about it is that they insisted that I needed to play on a Friday. And I'm thinking, I can't understand why a Friday when everybody seems to play on a Saturday morning in Zambia. Why am I playing on a Friday? But what they didn't tell me is that Friday, that's when ladies play and the men play on a Saturday. So I go there to the golf course, and it's just two of us, me and the coach. And I'm thinking, so is this just two? Like, how are we going to have the conversations if we're just two of us? He says, yeah, we need to onboard more ladies. And I'm like, this is hard work. I mean, number one, I don't even like the sport. And number two, I have to start onboarding people. I said, I'm not coming back.
I think that's quite interesting, especially when you talk about culture. One common thing that we know, obviously, is when it comes to gender barriers, it doesn't matter where you are. One thing in common is women around the world are almost facing the same issues within a different context, but something that's leading to the same thing. Yeah, so thank you for highlighting that. So I'd like to come to Nankhonde. I'm sure some of the things that Mizinga has mentioned, you have experienced that too. You've been on this journey for a long time. You are a mother. Sometimes I wonder how you're juggling so many things. So from the movie itself, what are some of those areas that you think have sort of like been significant in your own journey as an entrepreneur, as a mentor, as well as a mother? What is, some of the issues that can point to the struggles that you have faced in your own journey?
What a great documentary. I think what I heard in there really resonated at so many different levels, and it caught me because clearly from the onset there was a vision. Ashley had a vision of who she wanted to be, and she was working towards it. And I think that really anchored me. I had a vision of what I was working towards, and so whatever I went through, whenever I met my Norman, and from this I keep saying my Norman, when I met my Norman, that was a turning point. I had somebody who saw something and pushed me forward. And throughout the movie, I kept hearing these sort of triggers, because it's like you have a private boardroom in your head and you hear these conversations between your inner heroine and your insecure little girl. And eventually what you do is a result of how that conversation in your head ended. So many things resonated. And as an entrepreneur, and even before this, working and climbing a corporate ladder, I remember once being in a meeting and I was the head, and the minister was ready, and they all came in saying, then we can only let the minister in when the global team arrives and the head of the delegation starts the meeting. And somebody pointed out, she's actually been sitting here. She was here 30 minutes before everybody arrived. She's here. Nobody could think that myself at such a young age could be the one opening up and heading the meeting to then come in and have this negotiation with the minister over a huge grant we were negotiating. And so I had so many experiences. And then when I had my first child, I went back to the office, and it was quite clear that the person who was acting for me had no intentions of leaving my job. And it was such a sad awakening for me to think that the system was set up in a way that I was the one who was moved to another position, and I eventually left. But these rude awakenings you get along the way mean that I have now become Norman. I am Norman for other people, because I try and spare people going through what I did. And especially as an executive coach now, I work with a lot of women in leadership in Zambia and across Africa. And the experiences of those conversations, the imposter syndromes, and the conversations that we have in our heads. And yet we go out and we still do it. So what really kept ringing in my head is that courage. Do it anyway, do it afraid. You may be thinking something else, but who do I need to be in this moment? And what do I need to do to hold my ground? And then whatever happens outside this room for those 10 minutes, for that hour in this meeting, I need to be this person. And that really helped me get through things. But I had my moments having the children, and even trying to, when I went into entrepreneurship, in Zambia, we say, "Wombauli," work so that you can eat. Literally as an entrepreneur, if I'm not in the deal room, if I'm not at the meetings for negotiations, I miss opportunities. And I've had to miss opportunities because I've had to decide, right now I need to be a mother. Right now I actually need to be at school, which means I can't be in that meeting. And so it's always this trade-off, but it's this conversation over the years where I've got to find peace for myself. You win some, you lose some, but at the end of the day, I hold my values. And I continue to learn every day, watching Mizinga, reading Mizinga's book. I learned from so many women. Thank you.
Amazing. That's really, really fantastic. And it's good to know that we are all learning from each other. Sometimes from afar, sometimes as being as close to having a mentor, somebody who can walk you through that journey. And just on that point, I would like to come to Ashley. I think Nankhonde has mentioned one or two things that I'm really attracted to understand further. I'm wondering what was going on when you were having that conversation with Norman. You seemed very engaged, but you also seemed like you were in these thoughts. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that moment was for you? Did you have this sudden awakening, like Nankhonde is saying? What was going on, and why is it important to have somebody like that?
Well, I think what's interesting is, if you heard what Joan was saying, I was kind of having that dilemma of, here's somebody that I thought was a mentor who actually doesn't see what I'm talking about, who doesn't see that women are treated differently when they pursue this career. And so he chimed in to correct the issue and said, actually the numbers are pretty damaging, like pretty obvious that women are having a tougher time. And so it was nice to have him kind of stick up for what I was saying. And, it's interesting because he's much older. And so he has a lot of influence in our industry. But he's seen, you would assume that we would have gotten better by now. But when I think around the time of that interview, another study came out to prove our point even more, and he was quoting it. And so I felt a little taller. I was like, oh yes, we're on to something here. Lea-Ann, we actually have been saying this for years, and now the industry's finally caught up that there is a problem. So I'm no longer biting the hand that feeds me. I'm right.
And what, Nambula, what was so interesting when he walked in the room. So Norman Lear is one of the most powerful and influential people in Hollywood today. And so highly, highly regarded, very respected. And he walked in for the interview, and I was watching him as he said hello. I was watching him all of us were watching him,
Right.
but I was watching him, and he was very respectful. And for him to admit when the cameras were on, that he first looked at Ashley and had to slap himself in the face, was very, he first looks at her and he says, you're a beautiful woman. And then straightens himself out because he has experience and he realizes. And the other thing that I noticed from him is that he keeps up with what's happening in his industry with women, with underrepresented beings, because he knew the statistic, that stat that we showed on the screen after he spoke, he knew it. And not everybody knew that. Mostly nobody knew that. So he's amazing.
It was nice to have him reconfirm a lot of what we were talking about.
I'm going to start using the hashtag #MyNorman.
I know. I'm already thinking of how we're going to edit this. Yeah.
So just right there, Lea-Ann, being a mother, I know that most of the times our worry is having our kids to go through this kind of trajectory. And you had gone ahead of Ashley's career. I mean, you started first and you faced all these issues and struggles and biases. What are some of the biggest fears that you had? And especially that once a young woman is starting out a career, her life is almost sort of like shaped already, determined and structured, and anything out of the norm is considered unusual. So as a mother, what are some of the fears that you've always had? And I also just want to understand your influence in terms of prompting Ashley to go into such a movie production.
Yeah, let me tell you, her entire life, she wanted to be in film. I had a camera, I videoed, I did that work. But my career at the time, I was in tech. So I worked at IBM and I brought many new products to market at IBM. So that's what I was doing. I have a child, and my number one thought is I want her to never lose that confidence that she had when she was a little girl. So she was given every opportunity I could afford, right? So she said, Mom, I'm interested in stars. So I gave her everything she needed to study stars. Then she said, I'm interested in film. So my husband and I bought her cameras and put her in classes. We gave her every opportunity, and that actually is pointed out in the film. And we also see this in chat, that when your child is young and they see something they're interested in, my husband and I tried to nurture that and support her and believe in her. When she graduated high school, she was in the top 4 in her class. She was out of 600 students. She's a brilliant young woman. And she was on her way to go to a university in another state to study astrophysics.
Yeah.
And just before she graduated high school, she said, I really just like film. I want to make movies. I want to tell stories. And it took my husband and I a couple of days to recover. And
sometimes it's as simple as that. It shouldn't be complicated. We make it complicated, right?
Exactly. We make it complicated. We're like, oh no, we thought you were going to be a scientist. We thought you were going to be an astronaut. And so then we said, okay, this is what you want. So we supported that. And when she went through university, we supported her going, doing the extracurricular activity. She started working for major television stations during the summers. She got internships that were paid. And that's another point, is getting an intern is great. Paying that intern is so important. One of the studies that we saw is that most women do not accept they do not have paid internships. They accept unpaid internships. They need to start turning those unpaid internships down and go after the paid. And those of us who have the power, if we have interns and we have money, pay them. That's it. That's my short answer.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Lee. And I think that is very, very important. And I think I can almost resonate with how, like from the WEAC's perspective, how we found platforms to be extremely empowering, for entrepreneurs, for example, them having the opportunity where they can get onto a platform where they can demonstrate their skills, they can build their confidence. And I think that's really, really important. It's a form of support that we have seen really escalate how women entrepreneurs, for example, are able to get from one point in business to the next. So that really matters, coupled with mentorship and just having those figures around you that are able to cheer you on and give you the necessary confidence that you need, to forge ahead. And I'd like to come back to Mizinga. I saw an interesting comment in the chat box where you talk about the importance of parenting. And I think in the movie, there's a point where we hear the importance of men getting engaged, and also that it's their responsibility, they need to be accountable, on this agenda towards this fight. So Mizinga, I'd like you to share a bit about some of the struggles that you face in your ambition. What are some of the limitations that you can outrightly point to, and how did you deal with those limitations in shaping your career? We know that it starts early, the struggle starts very early. Yeah. So can you tell us about those moments? Yeah. And how you...
To be honest, the struggles start early, but they don't really change much as you go along when it comes to parenting. They just change in terms of what form. Even now, I'm dealing with that. My daughter just came back from boarding school, and I've been just so busy every day. And it's even easier when they're younger, when they don't kind of understand. But when they understand, it becomes harder, because then they're able to reason that, but who does that? I've been away and you're away all the time. So it just gets different and complex. So parenting is never easy, and I don't think there's a rule book for it. Every situation is different. Every parent is different, and every child is different. But I really struggled, and I talk about that in Braving the Odds, when I was kind of determined to make sure that I don't miss the major milestones for my son. And some of the major milestones, like when he started walking, I was flying somewhere, working. And, it's not like he could wait for me to say, I only start walking when mommy comes. I left this little boy who wasn't really crawling very much, because my son didn't really crawl much. And I come back and I'm being welcomed at the door with this little boy who's walking. And I've only been away for a week. And I'm thinking, for me, that was very emotional, because it's that major milestone that gets you questioning, am I really a good parent? Am I prioritizing my job over my son? I had to go through a lot of counseling to say, look, it's fine. You will miss a lot more of these, and it's okay. But we become self-critic as parents, because then you kind of think you have sleepless nights just trying to judge that, when he grows up, he'll say, I wasn't there. Well, even now, my son says things like, Mommy, but whenever it's PTA at school, you don't show up, Daddy shows up, And then I try to remind him the one time when I showed up, I said, but remember that time I came? And he's like, Mommy, please, let's just be clear here. You don't show up, Daddy shows up. So you kind of, it will always, it's hard as a career woman. Parenting is always hard. And it's in the small things, really, not the big things, where you're not able to cook for them in the evenings. You can only cook for them at weekends. So it's in that small things that really you become self-critic. But I think we are more self-critic to ourselves than our children are to us. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those are the unconscious biases, I think, that we've seen, throughout the film as well. I wonder if that is something that you have also seen as a major challenge, especially in your career, where we all unconsciously just make these prejudices, including women. I mean, this is not only about men, but women as well. We are contributing to creating a picture that is overbearing, and that's making women feel inadequate somehow. So within the workspace, are there any specific unconscious biases that you can allude to? And I would ask the same question to Nankhonde as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, unconscious biases. I've had so many unconscious biases, probably to me, where people would look at me and say, number one, because you're Black, they won't say it, but you can tell that they're thinking you have to prove yourself before they believe what you are saying. Especially when we were working for international organizations, they will look at you and say, okay, fine, what do you know? So, there's that bias that, you actually don't know, and until you prove yourself. But then we also get probably feel the same even with the men, and you think, would a man really be able to multitask the way we as ladies are able to multitask? And I think, mostly we think, I tend to think that if you want to get things done, really committed, no issues, hire a woman. If you want to put,
Right.
I mean, I'm a banker, so you've got, if you want to make sure that there's no fraud in the organization, in a sensitive place, hire a woman. So somehow you kind of think, if it's a woman, fraud is not going to happen. They're not going to steal. But if it's a man, you're not going to tell them, but you're like, maybe you need to be of a certain age, because if you are young, maybe there are issues there. So we have those unconscious bias to us, and we also have them, to others. Just that you think that, for a young one, if you're at a certain age, you can only do a certain job properly. Yeah, so we have experienced that. I have been unconsciously biased myself. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So panelists, please feel free to jump in whenever you can. It would be great to hear from you, Nankhonde, as well. We're talking biases, unconscious biases. Any thoughts around that?
I really appreciate what has been introduced, because it's true, unconscious bias works both ways. It's a two-way street. And sometimes it's a mirror about our own beliefs. And I think one of maybe the angle I'll take unconscious bias is really around when I've been aware that it's unconscious, it actually affects how I respond. Because once you understand that the person you're talking to can't or is not capable of having this conversation with you on this point, simply because it's so unconscious and it's part of their socialization and conditioning. And you can see that my increased self-awareness, which again is also part of our growth and journey, helps me to actually step away from conversations that previously I would get wrangled into, caught into emotionally. And there was something that somebody once said to me: you don't have to accept every invitation to conflict that you receive. And I realized that, okay, in this situation, I did have an opportunity to see things and why I was so triggered. Why was I so upset about something that happened? And would I be able to get my point across with this person at that point in time? And you get to a point where you decide how to use your energy. And so my relationship with unconscious bias has really been picking my battles, and understanding that it's there, but also that I also bring in bias. And I remember as an entrepreneur, one of the things, going to pitch or going to even get working capital from the bank, I'm so conscious about how I'm dressed, how I look, how I present myself. I mean, so many things that I think in the first 5 minutes when I walk into that space, I know that I've got to tick a number of things for them to listen to the first 5 words. And so, that's what unconscious bias and understanding of that does. And I also just wanted to bring in something, because what I've realized my sponsors did is they went beyond. They saw something. And I had mentors, and I still have mentors, but I recognize the power of sponsors, because for some reason they're able to see past any biases, and they actually see straight to the opportunity that is in you. And I think mentors are great because from their experiences, I've learned a lot, and I've walked with them and they've walked with me. But from when I understood the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, I recognized that the sponsor was somebody I had to ask to support me actively, and somebody to whom I, had to sort of demonstrate and carry my part of that I am capable, but that they're willing to go beyond even just what I showed them to back me. I've had a sponsor who's put their neck out on the line for me to be even recognized and supported to take a position and opportunity when they knew I could do it, but they couldn't put a measure to my confidence to do it. So a sponsor really, puts themselves out in that way, because when you don't get the confidence in the end, the first person you let down is yourself, but also there are other people involved when there's a sponsor. Right. And so I really wanted to speak to that as well, because I felt all my sponsors have gone beyond unconscious bias. Even when they've carried it, they've still gone beyond it. Thank you.
Yeah. Ashley, I see you nodding. Did you want to add to that?
Thank you. You can read my mind. I like you, Nambula. Let's see. I think that's why it's so important that we're talking, like the unconscious bias impacts us, it impacts the society, like the decisions that they're making. So it's so important. Yes, believe in yourself. Yes, work hard and have your ambition, but also realize there is biases impacting people, how they look at you. And I love I have to check off these 5 boxes before I can even say a word. That is so good. And because of that, I think that's why WEAC is so important, because I think before you know the ask, it's important to ask your support group, how should I word this ask? How should I present myself? So Nambula, that's what I wanted to say is it's so important to have these kind of groups to encourage each other and provide advice. And, mentors can be for one thing here, one thing here, one thing here. It doesn't have to be somebody who can answer all questions. I've got one person who can help me with how to distribute this. And I have one person who can tell me how to do my resume. It's it's just so important to keep that support group. And I think it's incredible what you all are doing, because that's exactly what is necessary for women to be able to walk in the room, check off those 5 boxes, and then know what they're going to ask and do it confidently.
Right.
Thank you.
That's great. That's amazing. And actually, this reminds me, 2 weeks ago, I met an old colleague of mine. So I haven't seen them in a long time. And so we were chatting, and the next question I get was, don't you ever get fed up of talking about these women issues? Like the last time I met you, you were on gender equality. The next time I met you, and you're still talking about it. And I said, wow, fed up? No, definitely no. Maybe frustrated, especially when we're not seeing things get done, when nothing is changing, when there's no cultural shift. Yes, I get very frustrated, and sometimes I get annoyed, I get angry, but I cannot stop talking about this, because I don't have to feel like I'm negotiating gender equity through. And this is what comes out in the film as well, which I found quite interesting. It's almost as if sometimes society is saying, we have to do this women issue because we have to, but I think it's a topic that we cannot relent on. I think we need to keep talking about it for generations to come as well. And so maybe I'll turn to Lea-Ann. I know that you've been in this industry for a very, very long time. Do you sometimes feel like you're negotiating your way through these issues, like all the way? How important is it to create a culture shift for everybody to get to understand that it's everybody's responsibility? It's not your responsibility alone. And sometimes do you ever get to feel like, people are thinking maybe it's the easiest way out? It's the easiest thing to tackle is to talk about women issues, like there are bigger things to talk about. How have you experienced that?
What I run up against is a lot of people don't want to talk about it anymore. They've seen so much of it on television. They're tired of Hollywood stepping in and telling them how to think. And this is just regular television that you see, or a movie that you see. I still have people asking me, are you still working on that movie? What else are you doing? They want me to stop talking about this movie. And the movie just got released, technically. So why are you doing this to me? So how do I get past this? I get past it knowing that I'm super aware Nambula, you are hyper aware of what's happening. Most of the people on this Zoom event are realizing there are activities happening around us that we don't have control over completely. It's not our fault when things happen to us. It's not my fault when somebody judges me before I even walk in the door. I have that extra layer of prejudice that's put against me because I'm older. I have ageism. I am 59 years old. Just like, yeah, what about it? You know, inside me, I am somebody who has ambition. People ask me about when I will have grandchildren. People ask me about when I plan to retire. And I still have ambition for my career. I am still making movies. I am still trying to impact the world. I want to leave this planet making a difference, even if I've affected 2 people. Hopefully I do more. But how do I deal with it? I just like an entrepreneur does. I have an entrepreneurial spirit. I wake up every single day excited, totally excited to do what I intend to do. My goal for this product, which is the movie, is to get people to, just like a product, buy it. I want people to see it. I want people to rent it. I want people to talk about the topic like we are today. And I wake up every day thinking that. I go to bed every night thinking about it.
Yeah, right. Great. Yeah, thank you for that, Lea-Ann. I think that's very important to highlight. So I'll turn back to Mizinga before we open it up for questions. We're talking about the corporate gender gap. Mizinga, I hope you're here. Yes, she is.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one point in the film where there's emphasis around, taking a systemic approach. And I think this it's a big issue now. Everybody's talking about a systems approach. Everybody's talking about integrating, gender equity into processes and systems. Why do you think it's so important for female leaders, especially who are in the corporate space, to really take a very intentional approach in terms of getting more women into the leadership positions, into the corporate space, into influencing? I think this is one area I think that we all need to do a lot and invest in terms of getting up there and ensuring that we're actually creating systems that work for women, to get into those spaces with minimal struggles. So you being in that leadership position, being an influencer, what are some of the things that you have done in terms of pushing women, to get into some of these positions? Using so I'm
a firm believer that we rise by lifting others, and I know it's quite easier said than done. But what we have done, for example, what we're doing at Absa, is that we're working on, we intentionally have a women's group. It's as easy as that, where you intentionally have a women's group, where you, number one, encourage them for self-confidence. Because I think one of the big issues women have is just self-confidence. Self-confidence to apply for positions, self-confidence to be able to say, even if I don't tick all the boxes, I can still do it. So it's that self-confidence, believing in somebody even before they believe in themselves, like you definitely can do it. So I think it's that journey. So what we have done is that we have a ratio where we are saying, it's actually in our objectives, that at any one point at senior leadership, we should have at least 45% or 50% women to men. So when it's when it's measurable, it's easier to achieve. Then it goes from being a theory because it is measurable. So what we find is that if you look at our firm, our organization, we do have the 50-50 at all levels, but as you are getting to the top, it becomes, I think right now we are probably at 30, 70. And because it's in the objectives, we know that for every interview that we have, so those are the systems we put in place, for every interview we have to make sure that we also we interview women. So women will get the jobs on merit, but it's just their ability to show up. So that's the confidence building that a mentor brings, to say, look, you can show up, even you have what it takes. Because if you don't show up, you're not going to get the job just because you're a woman. You're not going to show up confidently just because you're a woman, but it's the ability to actually show up. Then when you show up, half the time you do find that they do actually interview quite well. So we have a number of mentorship sessions with our women, a number of Zoom sessions with them, just really going through that confidence level, because we know that women are clever. That's why in most organizations, I think Lea-Ann and Ashley would attest to this, there we are at 50-50 or even more at lower organizations, at the lower part of the organization. But the only reason why it doesn't get to that level is what we've already discussed, the unconscious bias, the imposter syndrome, especially, where you think, I don't think I have what it takes. So it's the ability that you do have what it takes. Don't worry too much about what people think. Just do what you have to do.
Right. Wonderful. I think those are very actionable points that you've highlighted there. And it's very important to hear some of the things that are already happening. And we really need to spread this to ensure that we get into every system and ensuring that there's more uptake. Women are having, equitable access to all these resources. So to close the panel, I would like to pose one last question before we open it up for Q&A. Starting with Nankhonde, then I'll go to Ashley, Lea-Ann, and maybe end with you, Mizinga, to have your last statement. If there's one thing that you take away from this film, that if we all did that one thing, it would change a lot, what would that be, Nankhonde?
I think what was interesting was the moment that caught me, and this speaks to me as an entrepreneur, was when Ashley was in the conversation about the ask. And I think what we tend to do as women is we build relationships. We're not so good at leveraging those relationships we build. That for me has resonated and is key. And my takeaway and message, build relationships, network, but understand how to leverage them.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Ashley? I know you have many, many takeaways. I mean, this is your film, right?
I know. I guess my passion is understanding that there are learned behaviors that are influencing you. I know we're talking about imposter syndrome. Understand that this was something ingrained in you before you even realized it was there. So sometimes when you can actually acknowledge that it's not you, it's like this little creature back here telling you this, sometimes you can totally just turn it off and go, okay, I've decided I'm in charge, And so I feel like, when we say be confident, like, what does that actually look like? It actually means saying, no, right now I'm walking in, I'm going to ask the question, and I'm not going to go, is that okay? You're going to go, I want this. And when's it going to happen? Done.
I agree. Fantastic. Thank you, Ashley. Lea-Ann, yeah, I know there was a very interesting conversation that you had with Ashley when she was in the car and she was sharing the experience that she just had. So I'd like to take it from there. Okay.
Yeah, we have a clip from the film that we didn't put in the film, but you can go to our website and watch it. It's about the time and we had cameras rolling. It's almost like a reality TV show when we made this film. We had cameras rolling, and Ashley was telling me about what was happening to her. And I realized that she was being pushed into a box that I did not expect her to be pushed into at her age. I thought that happened in my generation. So the one thing that I would love for everybody to take away is to understand, or to be very self-aware of when you're getting pushed away from your dreams, and push back. Don't allow people in the culture around you to push you away from what you want. Keep fighting back. Amazing. And I think that's very, very important. Thank you for that, Lea-Ann. Thanks for sharing. Mizinga, I'll come back to you.
if you could just give us a final statement, but also just to really thank you for coming on board as our guest speaker. It's very important that, Zambian women across Africa, hear from you. You're a great influencer on this continent, and really happy to just have you. You're a very flexible person, very accommodating, and you share quite a lot that many women are learning from. So I'd like to get that last statement from you. What's your takeaway?
Look, I think my first takeaway is listening to that film, watching that film. It was almost like it was in Zambia. Ashley could have as well been in Zambia, or anywhere on the continent. So I think the issues women go through are the same. They're very similar. Maybe it's just a different culture, but they are actually very similar. And we can actually overcome. So I think to every woman out there, it's for the woman to realize that even now, I've been CEO for a very long time, different companies. I still go through unconscious bias. I still have the imposter syndrome. I still have the family challenges. But you just learn to deal with them more. You learn to stand up, and you also learn to have the faith. I'm a Christian, and I am able to stand up and say, actually, I've actually been through a worse situation than this, and I was able to overcome. So it's the women having the ability to know that, you can overcome and use your whatever experience that you have had to actually overcome what you're going through. And I think for me, the biggest tragedy is a woman not going through a challenge early enough in life, because if you don't go through the challenge, then you don't grow, and you don't put anything in your toolbox in your later years when you are faced. Because if you look at Ashley now, if you have to go through anything, I'm sure for you it would be like, yeah, I went through that and that's what happened. It doesn't it still phases you, but maybe it phases you less because you've got an experience to look back to. And so then you grow. So when the experiences come for every woman out there, just embrace them, knowing that they'll make you a better person. But don't give up. Whatever happens, don't give up. There are too many women looking up to you to give up.
Absolutely. I know that there's quite a number of questions in the chat box. So many great comments. It's a very engaging audience, so I'm happy about that. So I have one. Does she get sufficient support from fellow women up there? So that's your question. Nankhonde, what's your experience?
It's mixed. And I think just as we deal with our own unconscious bias, remember I mentioned it's a mirror. You're also sort of being reflected others. You see others, but you also see some of your own. And as a result, as a woman myself, I am not guilt-free of applying unconscious bias to other women. I'll be honest about that. And I think the key has been where I have seen it in a way that has turned out positively and negatively, and where I have initiated it, or where I have been at the receiving end of it. And I think increasing self-awareness has made me become even more conscious of myself. And I think as women, our own increased self-awareness about what we ourselves put out there and what we do helps us then reflect behaviors that others can then see for themselves that may not be supporting us as women. So I've had great experiences where I've been supported by women. And in fact, in the notes, what I put is my Norman is not always a man. My Norman has been women. And so I think my experience with women has also taught me that when we come together, when we are able to leverage that shared experience, sometimes you can be sitting in a meeting. I've sat before a panel or pitching as an entrepreneur, or in organizations in a board meeting, and there's another woman who just smiles at you at that moment where inside your confidence is just wavering, but what you're saying is not showing it, but inside you're shaking. And another woman across the table or in the room just does that look, you know what I mean? And it's happened to me where I just needed that at that point in time, and only a woman could have known that. And so it's both ways. And I love the way we're able to do that for each other. But I also understand that our own emotional journeys mean that we can't always show up like that for each other.
Right. Mizinga, would you like to add to that if you're settled now? There was a point that I liked in the movie where, she was talking about her best friend who was struggling with this work-life balance. And then, Ashley, I like the fact that you were able to provide that support system, and everybody needs that. And I guess that's what we're talking about. So any thoughts around that before Mizinga comes in? How important was that part of the film?
Well, I think for me, she was, one of my first close friends to announce she was pregnant. And so it introduced me into a new element, a new end of the spectrum that what women deal with when they want to pursue a career, when they want to have an ambitious career. So, it caused me to do a lot of more internalized thinking. Pioneers in Skirts was really just like me thinking about the world on screen. I'm like, how do we do this? How are we supposed to do this? And then I think sometimes, I know for her, it might have just been nice to talk to somebody instead of, somebody trying to solve the problem. Sometimes it's just nice to talk it out and go, yeah, this is hard. This is really hard. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but thanks for listening, and I try to be that person sometimes because we can't always solve it. Sometimes it's nice to just have, I'll say it again, a group like yours, Nambula, to just have a group of women to say, this is hard, what you're going through, you're not alone. And I think that's really what her story was, is like, you're not the only one who's ever done this and gone through it.
Yeah, that's very important. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing.
Nambula, I want to ask you that same question. Your fellow female professionals, how supportive have they been? And what would you wish more women would do more often?
Right. A good question. Thank you, Lea-Ann. So I am a very ardent believer in support structures, because I think all my life and throughout my career, my professional life, I have been surrounded by people that have believed in me, starting from family to friends. But I also agree with Mizinga in her early statements that it does get very lonely at some point. And sometimes people box you because they're always thinking, what is she thinking? And there's that uncomfortability that comes, with leadership, especially with people around you. And also just having to have a support system that is trusted enough, that are able to look out for you throughout the different experiences that you have as a leader. That is extremely important. But I'm lucky to say that I think throughout, I have also maintained and built a support system of friends, a very small circle, but friends and associates that are able to call me out, even in times when I don't necessarily do things right, because there are those times where not everything goes right. There are times when you want to beat yourself up and you just need that person to tell you, you know what, today was another day, tomorrow will be another. And I think that's really, really important. So I do have people that are always behind me, but I also just want to say, I also have a very supportive team. The WEAC team, amazing, very small team. But I think at every point, they are there to provide all the necessary support that is needed. And that is also very, very important. Yeah. So thanks, Lea-Ann. Okay. Rose, do we have any more time for one or two more questions?
There's a great question for Nankhonde.
Okay.
Are you reading it?
Yeah, I've just sent that to you, Nambula. A good question for Nankhonde.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yes, great question.
Yeah, so Nankhonde, can you respond to that? As a
apart
coach,
from increasing, go ahead, Nambula.
Oh, okay, yeah. So apart from increasing confidence and self-awareness, are there any other skills or traits women can develop to enable them to compete fairly and equally with men? In the Zambian setup, what are the main challenges women are facing on top, in addition to what has been discussed here? This is from Audrey.
Thank you. That's such a loaded question. Thank you, Audrey. And it's so important. I think there are differences there. So there's areas related to competence, which are technical, and there are other areas related to relational, which can be interpersonal. And so let me put it this way, answering this question in the limited time. There's a great resource. There's a book that I have found very useful for women, and it's called How Women Rise by Sally Helgeson and Marshall Goldsmith.
I think we lost her for a second. As we wait for Nankhonde to come back, I'll go to a question addressed to Ashley. How do you manage the pressure of today with a lot of happenings in today's world? That's from Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah,
sometimes social media is good and sometimes it's not good. So I think educating yourself on what's going on globally has been a huge motivator for me. I am a part of a women's group that's a global group, and we are always trying to support women everywhere and what they're confronted with. There she is. Hey, but
hi,
yeah. So we heard the rest of what you were saying. I'm answering one question now, and then I definitely want to hear what you were saying. Just really quick, it can all get pretty overwhelming. And so sometimes you do have to turn it off. Plus, I'm also a writer. And so I usually protect my mornings so that I can focus on that deep work and focus on writing and storytelling and things like that before I allow the day to come flying in. So that's how I handle a lot of dealings, and it's also important to note that you have your supportive group, and then you get out of that supportive group, and you're reminded that gender bias, sexism, racism, ageism is all alive and well. And so sometimes there I have to go and I have to call somebody and say, I need to talk about this because that was frustrating, So having that support group is really helpful too. Okay, did we lose her again? Nankhonde?
She's back, I think.
Okay.
Nankhonde, can you pick it up?
I'm back.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. So what I wanted to say is that there are things that are competence-based, and so you've got to learn what you need to learn from a functional perspective. And there are things that are relational-based, interpersonal, and around emotional intelligence. But just to share a bit from what you're talking about, the book, How Women Rise, talks about 12 habits that may be holding you back. And I think these 12 habits speak to things like reluctance to claim your own achievements. They also speak to things like, as long as I'm working hard, somebody will see it. And these are things men sort of don't assume. Part of it, I mentioned also, is leveraging relationships, not just building them. And then there's a key one, I think, and I'm just going to share a few, and we can share this resource later, Nambula, to those who have registered for this session, and put it in the chat. But there's also a question about focusing on that particular job, that particular moment versus your career in the long run. So having this long-term vision is very important. Don't get caught up in perfection, trying to do things so well. I think women are also so good that it's not ready to go out. I'm not ready to share it. But putting it out there and getting feedback and feeling confident that you can do it. So I would really just summarize by saying there are things that are competence, which you need to work on and start to understand what actually do I need to be able to do, the capabilities being asked of me here. And then from an emotional resilience perspective and interpersonal relationship perspective, what are the areas that I struggle with? What triggers me? What are the kind of situations or events where when I sit down later and unpack them with myself or with others, I can see that I have some inner work to do. So there's the external work with competencies, but there's the inner work. And I think in our Zambian context, it's at so many levels that we need to practice this because our culture, our society, and also our context puts forward certain biases that affect us. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you.
I think that's not just Zambia.
Yeah.
Women all over the world. That is excellent advice.
It's beautiful.
Thank you so much, Nankhonde. So I'm getting a warning here that we're out of time. So I'm afraid we might have to close this session. But I think it's been such a fantastic discussion. I'm sure you all agree that there's so many takeaways from this discussion, from the film. I watched it, I think 3 times now, and every time I'm learning something new. So it's really exciting that we are all able to resonate with what is happening, and also realizing that, listen, this is a global issue and all of us should be accountable. Men, women, we need to realize that this agenda needs to be taken further, and that we need to go beyond awareness. It's not enough to just talk about it. I think we need to take the necessary steps in making the world a more equitable place for women, for young women, for men as well. And this is why we are very grateful also for our male folk that believe in gender equality and that are doing everything to ensure that they are supporting women and men that are struggling in this space. So I'd just like to say a big thanks to, first of all, our audience. Thank you for connecting. Happy Women's Month. Great audience, great questions. Thanks to our guests, Mizinga, Melu. It was wonderful, really, really fantastic to have you this evening. Nankhonde, I know you're joining us from Johannesburg. Really, really great insights. Thank you, as always. We really value your partnership. And definitely a big thanks to Ashley. Fantastic work, Ashley and Lea-Ann. Thank you so much. We value your partnership. And I hope that we can continue to make these footprints, across the globe in creating this awareness and also taking the necessary steps that we need to continue, addressing the issue of gender equity. So thank you so much. Thanks to our audience. I would like to hand it over to Ashley to give us the final closing.
All right. Again, thank you everyone for giving us this extra time. Obviously, we wanted it, we needed it. And I want to thank you again for including us in your world. It means so much to us to learn about what you're going through, because we take that to other conversations and we remind people that this is a global issue. Again, this is a part of our impact relay, something that we knew we needed to do in order to impact real on the ground change. And yes, it is complementary. It is something we are doing for NGOs and activists. If you have someone in your community that might benefit from this anywhere, please go to pioneersandskirts.com. We do also screen at companies and schools and in other organizational environments. So if this is something you enjoyed, please reach out. It's a mother-daughter duo team. You're going to go up, Ashley and Lea-Ann, there they are again. This is something really, really important to us, and we thank you all so much for being here. And yes, please, in the chat, check out our Impact Relay survey. Again, that's something that is going to impact women everywhere. So thank you, guys. Thank you.